Wonderful. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm so pleased to be able to offer this webinar or conference call. I think it's a sort of an amalgamation of the two. We all know that these are particularly difficult financial times for nonprofits. We know that you guys have been working really hard to pivot financially, and we also know that it's been kind of blur's day, blur's month, blur's year. But believe it or not, the end of the fiscal year is close enough now that it is time to plan for it and to start figuring out what you're going to do to raise funds in the fourth quarter. And I'm really delighted that we are doing this for a couple of reasons. One is that any of you who've been on these webinars with me before knows how passionately I believe that you not only need lots of resources, but that you in particularly need lots of unrestricted resources. That having adequate unrestricted dollars is core to your mission as multi-issue children's advocacy organizations, so that you have the capacity to lobby, so that you have the capacity to address whatever the critical issues are for kids in your community, whether you've been able to raise funds for them or not. And as we've all seen in 2020, so that you can address whatever new issues arise, even if they come at you fast and furious with pandemics and new opportunities around talking about and making policy progress on race as the result of a new level of political will around race and ethnic equity. And even as we deal with the huge financial challenges that have occurred with the loss of your in-person fundraising events, my sense is that most of you have faced less problems with foundation donors than we first feared. But we also know that we're entering a long recession period, and that even if you have not faced those yet, they may be coming. And I think for some of you, they are coming. I also know some of you are seeing reductions in donations from corporate donors because the business world is really hurting, even if the stock market doesn't reflect that. All of which is to say that it is really critical to be focusing on how to raise donor funds, how to raise those unrestricted funds, and that a strong fourth quarter strategy is a critical part of that. Now, before I sound all gloom and doom, the other thing I want to say to you is that I have been trying to monitor the broader nonprofit world to see how their fundraising is going. And while there's unquestionably a lot of challenges, I'm also seeing a lot of people who have been able to successfully continue to fundraise, have been able to fundraise online. Partnership members are starting to do online fundraising events. We haven't had a report yet from Joe Dorman, but we will get one. And so I think, in fact, that if you are thoughtful and if you plan for your fourth quarter strongly, you can, in fact, bring in a significant portion of those unrestricted dollars that you need. And in part of it, of course, is because your core donor group understands precisely how important it is what you're doing now and why it matters for our economy and for our people. And so if people can donate to you, they will, because I think they get it. Of course, you need to make sure they get it. Mark says that Joe's event was fun and raised a lot of money, and that's really exciting to hear. So it can be done. One partnership member at least has led the way. I am now going to turn this over to Mark and Aaliyah and our speakers for today. Jasmine and I will be monitoring the chat. Please put your questions in the chat as you think of it. If it's a question that we think needs to be addressed at that moment, we will break in and ask them to address it. And if not, we'll make sure we address it at the end. But it's always better to get your thoughts and questions into the chat box as they come up so that we can make sure that they get addressed. Over to you guys.
Great. Well, thank you so much for the introduction, Debbie. and I'll kick things off. It's so wonderful to see so many familiar faces in the Zoom call with us today. And if we haven't had a chance to formally meet you yet, Mark and I are the principals of Sea Change Strategies, and we've been engaged by the partnership to really help build this muscle of each individual organization to have better capacity, stronger insights and strategy around individual fundraising. And so this is part of our workshop share series, because basically Mark and I found very early on in working with partnership organizations is that there's so much expertise and knowledge within the network. And often it's less about Mark and I imparting our wisdom or expertise upon you, and it's more about us figuring out a way to curate these information share sessions. And so I just want to very much express our gratitude to Mary Coogan from the Advocates for Children from New Jersey and Rebekah Raz from Westchester Children's Association for agreeing to be today's experience share experts. They're going to be sharing their insights, their experiences with Q4 and year-end planning. And if there are others of you who are on this call who also have a lot of wisdom and expertise here, just because you aren't one of today's experts doesn't mean that your opinion isn't valued. So please just put it in the chat and say, I'd love to share, I don't have a question necessarily, but I'd love to share my experiences, and we'd be more than happy to hear your voice. Like I said, this is a part of a series. We had our first Experience Share workshop last week around major donors in a virtual world. Jasmine mentioned that she's going to be sending out the recording for that if you missed it. This is the second in that series. And then the next one will be at the end of August, and Joe Dorman is going to be here, as well as Colorado Advocates for Children, I think is the acronym of the organization. It's not Carly who will be joining us, but a woman who's really helped them put on some successful events. I need to check in on her name in just a second. And then workshop 4 is going to be developing creative campaigns to engage and inspire in September. So those are the 2 remaining workshops in the series. As part of the process for today, I'm just going to very quickly provide some topic area context. Then Mary and Rebekah are going to share. Please chat in questions. Debbie, Jasmine, and I will be monitoring the chat. And then Mark will help lead the Q&A as we field those questions to Mary and Rebekah. For those who were on last week's call, this is going to be a little repetitive, but I think it merits repetition. I've made it a little shorter and more concise, but I think it's really important for folks to have a pulse on how donors are feeling right now. And there is a research and polling agency that I really respect called OG. And they recently launched a study showing how donors to progressive organizations like ours are feeling in this very tumultuous 2020. Now, I want to put a caveat here that this survey fielded in June. And so, and they published this study in early July. So it's already a month old. Typically that wouldn't be a problem. In 2020, it shifts underneath us. But I do think that this probably stands true, these notes that I'm going to share with you. So just so, in case anyone was wondering, almost half of respondents fear the worst of the pandemic is yet to come. So nobody's surprised by the report from the task force lead that COVID has become different than it was in March and April, and that it is all over the country, right? Everyone is expecting this. Half of donors to agencies like ours fear that it's yet to come. However, even though they're cautious about COVID, they are personally financially optimistic. Donors are much more confident about their own economic future than about the economy as a whole. So 58% of them feel somewhat confident, feel very or somewhat confident about their personal finances. versus 31% for the general economy. So when Mark and I are looking at these indicators for clients, we are feeling really good that people, even if they're feeling a little blah about the general economy, they're feeling pretty good about their own personal finances. This next one, it just bodes really well for people who are looking to diversify revenue streams by looking to individual donors. The intention of these donors to keep giving is stronger than ever. And it's especially strong among mid-level donors, people who give a leadership level gift to organizations. For partnership organizations, these tend to be people who give above $250. Some organizations count a mid-level donor as someone who gives above $150, but these are folks who've made a significant investment in your organization. 73% of donors are confident they will continue giving, and 84% of those mid-level donors are confident they will continue giving. With 55% of those mid-level donors being very confident. So that really shows the passion and level of intensity that these donors are feeling about their commitment to keep giving. So all in all, it's not a great environment to be fundraising in, but it's not the worst environment. And as Debbie said, COVID and the repercussions and the fact that people are more focused on racial equity and there's more political will there, it really is giving organizations like yours a why now moment. And Mark and I would suggest that you seize upon that. And we'll talk to Mary and Rebekah about how they're planning on doing that as well. I just have two more context slides, and then we'll get it over to Mary and Rebekah. But the reason why Q4 is so important is that year-end fundraising is a seasonal time when individual donors give. Right, so typically 60 to 75% of individual revenue is usually raised in the month of December, right? You cultivate, you engage throughout the entire year, but in December, it's the time to ask. Much of that revenue is usually raised in the final week of the month. So of course you have Giving Tuesday and that initial early bump that some of you may or may not have had success with. But the proof, right, when you're really going to see a lot of money come in is in the final week of the year. And I would like to just underscore that it's not necessarily just about tax deductions. C4s tend to do just as well. So it really is mostly seasonality that's driving people's giving at this time. And then before I turn it over to Mary and Rebekah, really what I would just, urge you to consider is that the ask is only one part of fundraising, right? I wish we called fundraising like relationship building or something like that, because it's really just like a tenth of what you do when you're a fundraiser. So the question is how can you design your Q4 communications to really cultivate and engage donors in advance of December? There is a lot of competition, but there isn't a lot of competition that really stands out, right? So how can you inspire your donors and stand out in a very competitive crowd? Giving Tuesday may or may not be effective. I've heard it go either way for partnership organizations. So the question is how can you leverage that day for what it's worth without wasting resources? And then finally, don't forget the basics, right? How can you optimize your donation forms right now? How can you update your database in advance of December? Are there kind of brass tacks things that you should be doing now so you don't wake up in November going, oh my goodness, I wish I had done this in August? So with that, I am going to turn it over to either Mary or Rebekah, whoever is going first. And I'm going to mute myself. Welcome.
Okay, I think I'm going first. This is Rebekah, and I apologize. I can see my image is frozen. All of you are frozen for me, but I'm on my phone, so I hope that you can all hear me. I did have some show and tell that I was hoping to show you, but unfortunately, since my internet is not really working, if it pops back on, I will show you, but otherwise, I'll just talk. So can everyone hear me? Can I get a thumbs up from someone if you can hear me? Okay, I got thumbs up. Good. Well, thank you everyone for inviting me, and thank you, Aaliyah and Mark, certainly for inviting me. I was excited to get to talk about some of the work I've been doing at WCIA on end-of-year campaigns. I thought I would just share a little bit of my background before I began, just to put things into context. So I've been a fundraiser for 20 years. I joined WCA about 2.5 years ago, and previous to that, I had been fundraising mostly for direct service and educational institutions. So advocacy fundraising was a new thing for me, which I actually think was a really great way to learn fundraising for advocacy for this organization, because I came from outside. I wasn't ingrained in what it meant to fundraise for an organization like WCA. So I've taken it upon myself to make our campaigns friendly for even the most novice advocate. And I'll explain how I've tried to do that. So aside from our event fundraising, oh wait, my colleague who is on here said that she can actually share things if I would like her to. Thank you, Anya. I might ask you to do that. So aside from event fundraising, so we have our virtual event coming up at the end of October, and our major donor fundraising, which is done face-to-face. Our end of year is our biggest fundraiser, where we typically raise about $60,000 from a couple hundred donors. Throughout the year, we also steward these donors by sending monthly e-news bulletins, quarterly e-news letters. We give them phone calls. They all get handwritten letters when they make a gift of any size, and we update them constantly on social media. And our year-end appeal begins in earnest at the end of November. So traditionally, when I came on board, I came in December. The year-end letter was a 4-page document that listed all of the accomplishments over the year. Sometimes it was a story that I can't even see anyone anymore, so I still hope I'm on. It was a 4-page document that listed out all the accomplishments of the year, and it was very bulky. In addition, we also sent out 5 emails throughout the course of a little over a month, which is a lot. So when it was my turn, I decided that we needed to change things up a bit. So I reduced the bulk of our end-of-year letter, decreasing it to a 1-page front and back document that looked very similar to our data publications. Now, I also cut down the number of emails we sent out to 3 from 5. Revolutionary? Well, actually, it took a lot of convincing to our development committee members, our WCA board members, and senior staff to feel comfortable with a smaller letter. They had been doing it this way for about 10 years. And so the thought of reducing the size of the letter was sort of groundbreaking in a way. I had a sample of the letter, and I'm happy to afterwards send these links to Jasmine so she can send them to everyone. So the letter, you can see, is front to back. We had to hire a graphic designer to make it look like something that WCA would produce, like our data publications. And it worked out really well. I am of the soundbite generation, so generally when someone wants to ask me a question, I like to say, get to the point already. So I don't like to go through a 4-page letter, and I don't think others do as well. So we did raise more money from that year, from the previous year, and we did raise from newer donors as well. In addition, the board was very proud of the product we created because they felt like they could take it with them and use it to talk to others about the work that we were doing. And it had nice little images, so anyone could understand it. Okay, so then last year, I go from one challenge to the next, and the last year's was a lot riskier. So recently, our organization adopted the issue of childhood homelessness. So in Westchester County, childhood homelessness looks vastly different than it does in neighboring New York City, where even if you have a roof over your head, you can still be considered homeless. So in our county, there are close to 3,000 homeless children that we know of that are living in doubled up or tripled up situations, which we consider homeless. And that's actually, unfortunately, an undercount. So at WCA, we are working to expand the definition, among other things, to expand the definition of what homelessness is so that it will include the federal definition. So we chose to focus our end-of-year campaign on childhood homelessness, and the best way we thought of doing this was by writing a children's book. So Anya, if you have an opportunity to find our Meet Wendy picture, you can plop it on there and share it. So I had a picture of Wendy, and basically, Wendy, it was a challenge to just even create Wendy. Oh, look, Anya's coming to the rescue. There's Wendy. I hope you can all see Wendy. Okay, so some of the challenges we had in creating Wendy. First of all, needed to convince my boss that it would be worth the time and money to take the risk of creating this book. In addition, we needed to find a character or create a character that didn't look too male or too female, too black or too white, too young or too old, a character that really anyone could relate to. Not such an easy thing to do. Next, we needed to create a story that was true to the homeless situation in Westchester. So the book needed to be short, not too expensive to create, and needed to have a campaign-esque included in it, which is no easy task, but we did pull it off. So my assistant's mother happens to be an amazing artist and offered to create the visual storyboard as a donation. And she is truly incredible. I mean, she whipped this stuff up in no time whatsoever. And listened to our suggestions every time she tried to make her a little more girly. We were like, no, don't do that. She needs to be sort of identifiable by everyone. After the book was finalized, so the whole WCA team worked on the story, which there was a lot of back and forth because we had to make it as simple as possible so that even a child could read the book and say, oh, I understand what they're talking about. In addition, we once the book was finalized, so the back page has the actual ask, we hired, he donated his time, volunteered, Michael Boatman, who is an actor. You might recognize him from shows like China Beach, Arliss, and Spin City. We are very lucky because his wife sits on our board, and he is so lovely. So we asked him, sort of like a reading rainbow, to read the book for us so we could put it on YouTube and then use that as our ask. So Anya, I don't know if you are able to show the video. It's short, so let's see if it works. Ooh, I saw something. There we go. I can't tell if it's working because everything is chopped up on my end. Is it working? Give me a thumbs up if it's working.
Can anyone get audio? I'm not getting audio.
No, I'm guessing you need to click the little button when you share your screen.
Yeah, we're not getting audio.
Anya, do you know how to create some audio for them? Anya is my miracle worker who knows how to do things that I don't.
We'll give Anya a little time because this is so good. I'd love for folks to be able to see it.
Yeah. So even
I will
that would be
post the link in the chat and I'll work on the audio.
I didn't quite hear that, but maybe some of you did. Okay, so so we'll show the video. If we can show it after, great. If not, we'll send the link. But as you could see very briefly, Michael, he's amazing, and he actually makes the ask for us in the video itself. So as for the amount of money that we raised, we actually raised the same amount of money that we raised the year before. So you may ask yourself, was it successful? Absolutely, and I will tell you why. I received so many phone calls from our major supporters who were blown away by the creativity of our campaign. We were able to distribute the book far and wide in a way that no other year-end campaign would have been able to be distributed. Our partners have asked for numerous copies to distribute to their groups, and we were able to use the Wendy character in the months leading up to the campaign and after the campaign. And before COVID changed everything, Wendy was going to be distributed to schools as part of curriculums that teach about homelessness. So now what? How do we follow up with Wendy? So we had high hopes for what we were going to do with Wendy and with homelessness and lots of campaigns, but we're actually in a very interesting time period because, as all of you know, COVID has laid bare the inequities that existed in the system before COVID existed. And so all the things that we've been fighting for are now being brought to light. And so this year's end of year campaign is really going to focus on the racial inequity, on technology problems, on homelessness, and what that means for children and COVID. For all the things that people are thinking about right now, Black Lives Matter, we have a lot that we can tie into that is very relevant to what's happening right now. And so we're going to focus on that again, one page, front and back, not too long, get to the point. But it's going to be very direct and talking about our impact as an advocacy organization, especially during this time, before, during, and after COVID. So I will leave it there. I'm sorry that none of my show and tell worked, but I will send links so that you can see it all.
And we got to see the illustrations, Rebekah. It looked amazing. I think everyone got a sense of the visual of it. It was really cool.
And before
we have the link in the chat, so everyone will get to watch it after the call.
Wonderful. Perfect. Thank you for everyone's help with that.
Before we pass it on to Mary, there were just a couple of factual questions for you, Rebekah. One was from Helen Smith. Did you change your donor list? And related to that, Jesse asked, how many years worth of donors do you all typically send year-end appeals to? How far back?
So that's a great question. And actually, we used to send our end of year letter, so that traditional 4-page letter went to everyone who had ever given at any time to our organization. And when I came in, I was like, wait a minute, that's crazy. If people aren't giving to us for 3 or more years, they're not reading that 4-page letter and we're just wasting money. And so we made a list of all the prospects. So there's actually 2 letters that we send out. One that goes to people who hadn't made a gift yet, and that was only to people who hadn't made a gift in the last 3 years. I didn't go past that. And then we also sent a letter to anyone who already made a gift, thanking them and asking them if they'd like to do a little more. But the Wendy book, we sent to everyone because it was so different. We wanted to make sure that everyone saw our unique campaign because it's a great book just to have, and it might get people who were once engaged want to re-engage. And it did. It did engage many new donors who hadn't given in years. We were very surprised we got gifts from them. Was there another question?
Donor list. I guess you answered it.
Yep.
So, yeah.
Okay.
Mary, it's all yours.
Yeah, let's switch over to Mary. And again, if anyone has questions, just chat them in and we'll make sure to get them in the mix.
Okay, thank you. So our annual appeal is not so exciting as Rebekah's, and I have seen that video and it is a tremendous video. It's very creative and he does make a great ask in that video. Advocates for Children of New Jersey, or ACNJ, we do a much more traditional appeal. So just as Rebekah has 20 years of fundraising experience, I had no years of fundraising experience, and I'm an attorney by training. So a few years ago, thanks to Deb Stein and the partnership, I was able to go to a 2 or 3 day training by Mark and Aaliyah, and it was fabulous, and I learned a lot. And a couple of things that have stuck with me and we've incorporated into the ACNJ fundraising plan is that relationships are everything. And that you should never discount anybody who's giving you money, even if it's a small amount. You want to continue to build on that because you want to retain those donors. So we've always tried to do that. Scheduling is critical, and I'm going to talk a little bit about scheduling in terms of our annual appeal. And then the big takeaway was the idea of you ask, you thank, you report, and you repeat. So that was something we had not done. We had never really reported. We really had done an annual solicitation letter in December, and then we had thanked everybody in January, but we would send out broadcasts and things, but we had never really been in touch with our donors during the year. So that has since changed. So over the past couple of years, we have done a report out just in terms of our activities in the spring. We did not do a subsequent ask, but we are doing that with Mark and Aaliyah's help. We're starting that this year. But we did get a really good response in that people called my boss to say, it was so nice to get a letter from you and not have to write a check or not have you ask for other money. So we realized that was a positive. The other thing that we started to schedule was reinstituting our annual report. We had done that in the past, and one of the things I had learned from the training is that people do like to see an acknowledgement. They like to see their name as a donor. So starting now, we will start pulling out the donor list for the past year, and we will do an annual report. I can share this with people, and I don't know if, Aaliyah, I don't know if people can see this, but we try to make it really colorful, highlight things we've done during the year. And then we also have an annual breakfast. So we acknowledge our donors, but then we also give an additional acknowledgement for anybody who supports our annual breakfast. So the annual breakfast started 4 years ago, and it was initially attended, it was 90 people, and it was really just to acknowledge we had been putting out our Kids Count data book for 25 years. It was a lot of fun. It was very successful. We did it the first week of December, thinking, you know, it was sort of the kickoff of the holiday just after Thanksgiving. Nobody else was doing anything. And the other thing which we loved about the breakfast is that it's very low cost. So for very little money, even if we didn't get a lot of donations, we figured there was no harm. What could we lose? So we had about 90 people the first year. The second year, we got it up to 230. Last year, we had 275, and we moved it to a larger venue. And again, we've celebrated our 40th anniversary. We've celebrated our census outreach, and really, again, kept it low cost, meaning it's just a buffet breakfast, a very tight program. People arrive at 8:30, they're out of there by 10:30. And we do an ask during the event, but the bulk of our money is raised by our sponsors. And our sponsors, the letter for the sponsors is really the kickoff. After our annual report goes out, is the kickoff of our annual appeal. So we ask everybody who donated last year, who was a sponsor of the event, if they want to sponsor our breakfast again. It's mostly our vendors and board members, and then friends of board members who came the prior year who had a really good time. Because again, it's very upbeat, it's very festive. A lot of people haven't seen each other in a while, and people enjoy it, and it's pretty casual. So it's $1,000 for a table, $500 for a partnership, and for the $1,000 you get 10 tickets. And most of our board will sponsor a table, or our vendors and some of our foundation funders. And then we ask them to bring friends who don't know anything about AC&J so we can introduce AC&J to people. Through that, we actually have gotten funding, but we've also gotten a couple new board members, people who were brought to the event and then really were excited about it and started to get involved in our activities. The other thing I think that makes it nice is while we have an ask at the event, it's not a big ask. So we might make another $5,000 or $6,000 during the event, but we have raised from like $19,000 the first year to $40,000. And it's pretty standard. And again, it doesn't take a lot of effort. The office takes care of it. We do our program in-house. We put the sponsors on it and the program. So again, very low cost. Immediately after the breakfast, we usually do a short little video. We do have a person who's really good at that on staff, and pictures, and we send out a broadcast to our entire network saying, if you couldn't come, you still have an opportunity to give, but you really missed a fun event and hope you catch us next year. And then for Thanksgiving, we always give baskets to a local church. So we always do a short video at Thanksgiving showing us wheeling our baskets around the corner. And that's our Thanksgiving holiday pictures, the AC&J staff with our baskets. And then the beginning of December, right after the breakfast, we will probably a week or so later send out an annual appeal card, which is really a card, picture of a child inside, highlighting a couple things that we accomplished during the year. And then we put in a slip for people to make a pledge or a donation. And we've done pretty well. So we have a couple of former board members who give us money. So let's say that's $50,000 out of the breakfast, we probably get another $50,000, $60,000 out of the annual appeal. But again, when I look at our list, thanks to my tutors, Aaliyah and Mark, we went back and looked at our list, and I'd say we have 25 people who every year give us $250 or less. And then we have another 75 who give us anywhere from $250 to $2,500. And so we do try to thank them. Board members will call people and thank them for the donation. Board members who brought friends who donate, they write a personal note. So we've really tried to incorporate that personal connection, really trying to retain people so that we can, count on this steady income. because I think, as Deb Stein mentioned at the beginning, this is our unrestricted funding that lets us do our advocacy, and that's really what we push. So I'm trying to think if there's anything else. In terms of our database, I am going through the database now. We will clean out people that haven't donated in the last 5 years. We probably will send the thank you and the annual appeal to anybody who has given in the last, not the annual appeal, I'm sorry, the annual report, anybody that's given in the last 3 years. And then that annual request will be for the people who've given the last 2 years.
Mary, while people, thank you so much. While people are chatting in questions, I have something that I'm curious about. You said that, you know, a couple of years ago, you know, you were new to fundraising. What was the hardest thing for you to implement? Because some folks might be on this call going, whoa, Mary's done a lot. But like, how did you first, well, maybe not what's the hardest thing, but how did you first approach it? Like, what was your first task?
So I tried to figure out a schedule, because that was something you guys taught us, that you have to allow enough time. And the other thing that I think was really helpful is after we wrote a letter that wasn't that great, you or Mark cleaned it up for me. So that was always helpful. I think that does teach you then how to do it better the next time. I think we also tried to work with our communication staff. As I said, we do have a person who's really good making videos. And she's very creative in terms of the graphics and the annual report. So we can do a lot of that in-house that some people can't do. But if you have a graphic designer who's done your kids count reports or something else, and they kind of know your color scheme, I think it's easy for them to help you. And the other thing we tried to do, like with our annual report, is sort of create a format that we could use every year, because we all don't have a lot of extra time and we don't have a development person. So we look for not easy ways to cheat, but kind of things that you can systematize, right? And I think if you can do that, it makes it a lot easier the following year just to take the same format and build in the information on your annual report. And people do like it, I have to say. I know at the training, we had a big discussion about that, whether people like stuff online or, you know, they want something that they can touch. And my sense is our donors do appreciate getting the annual report. They don't want anything that's extravagant, but they do like getting something in the mail. So I think trying to incorporate those things was hard, but we didn't do it all the first year. That was the other thing. The breakfast was very small the first year, then we built on it. And we're not a gala organization. So the breakfast really, the board loved it. And I think people felt they could write a check and get the acknowledgement. And it wasn't a huge amount, but it was significant for $1,000 for a table, but it was doable. So we tried to make things easy like that. But, you know, we learned as we went along. It's taken us about 3 years. And this year, people don't want to do the breakfast. I know, Leah, you had a great suggestion that we try to have 3 venues, different places in the state, and people do not work. So we are probably going to be watching the next training at the end of August on how to host the ideal virtual event, because I think that's the way we're going to go this year.
Joe Dorman went the extra mile with his event and sent cards to everyone that they could redeem to have food delivered, and then got a bunch of local restaurants to participate. So people actually got their meal at his event.
Wow.
Risky, a little bit risky.
Risky.
Jesse, you put something in the chat that I think is relevant, because both Mary and Rebekah seem to have followed Aaliyah's advice in putting together a framework of the basics and then being creative around that. And I'm wondering what you might want to chip in.
I don't know if I have anything much to chip in beyond what Rebekah and Mary have talked about, but that's like, so what Mary's saying, like, we also don't have any full-time development staff. It's like a little bit of this person, a little bit of this person, a little bit of this person. And so that like editorial calendar of what we're doing and when we do it has been so important. And it's almost like, because you basically for the year, you're like, oh, okay, well, this is our ask, this is our thank, this is our report. repeat, like, you can lay it out. And we do 2 asks, and we also have some system. We have a like beginning of the year thank you card, like New Year's card. And we do, obviously we send out thank yous to people. And we put our annual report out actually like in the early fall. I'm so sorry. My 4-year-old is doing Legos at the same table where I work. We do our annual report. We used to do it kind of in August, and now we've pushed it back to October so that it is kind of right there at the beginning. So it's basically like 2 months before we're going to ask you for money, we're going to tell you what we did with your money. So we timed it like that and changed that up. And this year, we're actually going to call our donors. So like, not to ramble on, but as a report back from last week's conversation, when like major donor stewardship, do we cancel our coffee or do we not cancel our coffee? We cancel our coffee. And now have I'm going to do some call lists for my COO, who is much more interested in individual fundraising than my ED is. So I'm going to do some call lists for her. And then in the fall, we're going to call a longer list of donors to say, hey, check your mailbox because your annual report should be there, like your physical annual report. And also our board members have been asking about how they can help with fundraising, since during the last board meeting, we said, hey, we need you guys to give us money, and they did, and then they were like, how can we help? So that's going to be a first task for a lot of them, is to call like 10 donors and say, hey, be on the lookout for your annual report. So that's all happening beginning of October.
It's a great shallow end of the pool ask for board members who may feel shy about talking to other donors.
Yeah, that's what we thought.
I really love the framework of like the cadence, like you get your cadence together, right? Then with the cadences, you think about the depth of the touches, like is it an email? Is it a phone call? Is it a breakfast? Is it virtual? And then on top of that, you put the Rebekah creative frame, right? So it's for me, I think of end of year as cadence, depth of touch, and then creativity sparkled on top. And I kind of think that that's a nice way to approach it.
It's like building on a solid foundation.
This is Debbie, and it might seem a little weird timing to do this, but I suspect some of you are thinking, in the scope of our overall budget, maybe the amounts of money we're not talking about are not, the amounts we're talking about are not that important. But here's the thing, those are the dollars that make everything else you do have an impact. And it doesn't take a lot of unrestricted dollars to fund Mary's time when she's actually talking to legislators and lobbying a particular bill. But if she can't do that, all the work they do with foundation dollars never quite gets the new law or policy across the goal line. That's actually a way you can talk about the impact of dollars to some donors if you think they're going to understand that. But it also explains why putting the kind of staff time in for what sounds like, for many organizations, a relatively small part of your budget is nevertheless essential, because those are the dollars that get you that last, I hate using the football analogy, I need a better analogy, but get you all the way there to where you're really having an impact on kids. And it doesn't take a lot to free up the time for somebody to go up and talk to the governor or talk to the speaker or talk to 10 members in the House or the Senate. But without that, everything else, I don't want to say it's futile, but it's much less useful. And I just want to lift that up, because that's what justifies taking the time to follow Aaliyah's steps and to do the basic organizing that I hope everybody noticed. Jesse too said, just, systematizing matters. And Mark and Aaliyah, do we have a little list of the things? I think we did at one point that we shared, right? It might be good to circulate that again, of the systematic steps and the cadence.
Sure thing.
And Aaliyah, got a question for you from Helen. Can you speak more about cadence?
Yeah. Yeah, so I like to think of, and Mary alluded to this, right, that the fundraising relationship is built on, I actually, Mark starts it with ask, but I start it with report, and it could go either way. But the idea is that you ask, you thank, you report, you repeat, right? And this is happening throughout the year, right? Ask, thank, report, repeat. Now, you do this knowing that there's seasonality to individual giving, right? So I definitely think you ask, thank, report, repeat at the beginning of the year. But towards the end of the year, you might want to increase that cadence a bit, right? Where you're making donors feel really good and you're doing a lot of thanking and reporting in August, in September, October, November. Mary talked about her Thanksgiving card, you know, and all of those kind of like feel good things that are happening, you know, as the holidays kind of shift into stark relief. And then in December, you ask, ask, ask. I think Rebekah mentioned 5 touches on email, and then, you know, the letter, you know, definitely taking a look at segmentation. But that's kind of the broad picture, right? So for the full year, ask, thank, report, repeat. For Q4, report, thank, report, thank, report, thank, ask, 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 ask. And then remember that it doesn't end on December 31st. Incorporate your kickoff to the year, your thank you, into your year-end planning cycle, right? So that way you're not just at home on January 1st going, oh, we did it, and you don't have a message that is ready to send out to folks, or people aren't getting acknowledgments, etc. Rebekah and Mary, would you add anything to that?
No.
So I agree 100%. And, you know, like with our Wendy book, for example, even though the ask was at the end, and I do hope you guys watch the video, that Wendy continued to sort of live after January 1st with, you know, we kept sending her out and saying, did you have a chance to meet Wendy? Because if you haven't, she's still here. And then sort of giving it a new life and giving it to partners and others so that the ask didn't just end there. And we actually do 7 touch points before we make an ask. But during the course of the year, you know, at the end we do, you know, I try to cut down from 5 asks to 3 because I notice that people get annoyed when we ask too many times in our community. But so, you know, we think if you do the thank you report, and then 3 asks, sometimes we're a little more successful, but 100% agree with, you know, in January, we are still, you know, thanking people, reporting out and asking because there are people who didn't get in time. So we're still at it.
But again, people, just to build on something Rebekah said, people are a lot happier when you ask if you've thanked and reported. Right. So like I said, it's all about relationships. Fundraising is not about the ask. It's about the entire cycle of the relationship. Mary.
So I was going to say, I also think people like to be part of the team.
Yeah.
So the people who have been giving to us over the past 5, 6, 7, 10 years, by trying to make them part of the team and say, as you taught us, was it's about them accomplishing it with us. So I was just thinking, we actually sent out like an agenda thing, which had a list of all of our agenda items. And then it was, you helped us do this, and the checkoffs of what we did. So this was another thing we sent out. So it's another touch, but I actually think people feel good because they've actually helped accomplish something. And I think that's why our breakfast has become so successful, because we invite some of our partners, have guests come and stuff. So everybody feels like they were part of year's effort.
Yeah, I love that. The donor as the hero, right? You know, we sometimes as organizations, we tend to think that we're the ones who are doing the work and making the change. And yes, you are, but donors engage because they want to see themselves as having a part to play. And so I really love that point, Mary.
Debbie said something great in the chat. We always say the best grassroots advocates are the donors and the best donors are the grassroots advocates. And they're all major stakeholders. We have 7 more minutes. You can learn everything you need to know in the next 7 minutes to have a successful year end. So this is your moment. And if you want, just unmute yourself.
I think people, if you start to schedule stuff now in terms of going through your database, it really will help. And if you can do any type of an annual report to give people credit for what you've been able to accomplish so far, I think it will just go a long way. But you really do need to start now, because that is one thing we did learn the first year. Everything takes a little bit longer because you're doing this in addition to your regular day job. So you got to plan a little.
Mary, can you just talk a little bit about what you do in August, September, October, November, and December to give people a sense of a calendar, and then maybe our other speakers can, comment on their variations on that, just to give people a little bit of a timeline.
So I'll give you the timeline for this year, what we're hoping. So right now we are pulling the lists out of our database to start our annual report. And that's going to take a week. Clean that up to make sure that we have all of our donors from 2019 listed correctly. And that does take some work. And then we have to really identify what are the things we're going to highlight in our report. So we try to have a theme in the annual report every year, and that'll be determined by the communication staff. And then somebody's got to go back through pictures, and we try to have that ready to go by September, and then hopefully it's out by October. In the meantime, we are sending out a report letter now. So people get it, and we're actually putting out an ask with that this year. We didn't typically do that. Our board, we have a fundraising committee, so they're meeting right now to determine what kind of virtual event we're going to do, since we're not doing the breakfast. But typically they would have been determining what's the level of sponsorship, who are we going to ask, and who's going to sponsor tables. So all that would be going on over the summer. So in theory, by September, you'd be ready to send out your letters to ask for sponsorship or whatever end of year event you're going to have. Your annual report would be starting to get printed. So that would be mailed out at the beginning of October. And then we would be planning the event and trying to get people to come to our event for November. And then we do our Thanksgiving Day card at the end of the, at Thanksgiving. And then December, the first week, is the virtual event. And then we do the card, which is sort of our end of year appeal, which is the last ask, and that would go out the middle of December.
That's great.
But again, that's all the theory. There will be hiccups, but that's the plan.
That's really helpful. Do Jesse or I think it's Rebecca have variations on that you want to share?
Well, our whole calendar sort of has been thrown off because we usually have a large gala in the spring, which was postponed to the end of October. So we have an annual report that is being worked on as we speak. Very similar, reporting out with pictures on all the stuff that we did. The benefit of doing it online, since we're not, so much of our stuff is online now, is that it can be longer than it usually is. So we try to fit a lot of information into 4 pages. Now we can make it 17 pages because online scrolling, people just keep going and it doesn't seem to matter as much. So that will be going out end of August, beginning of September. Our virtual event is now October 28th, which is interesting because it backs right up to our end of year campaign. So basically the end of our dinner starts the campaigning for the end of year. And we have to be very careful with how we ask people who may have just given to the virtual benefit to give us money at that time as well. So I will say throughout this whole pandemic, I have been sending monthly reports on email to our major supporters with, specifics on what we've been doing over this amount of time. Plus, I call them all the time just to see how they're doing, which they appreciate. I never ask for money during this time because I know that people are feeling very uncertain, and many of our donors are over the age of 65. So a lot of it is just talking about, how are you doing? Is your family still healthy? I mean, we were right where the pandemic started in the country. And so now it's quieted down significantly. But in the beginning, every time I talked to someone, it was like, I'm sick, my friends are sick, my family's sick, someone died. It was horrible. So now at least it's like, I'm doing well and I got to the park today, or I went food shopping. So much more upbeat conversations. But I've been making sure to have conversations constantly with people and just telling them, you know, an interesting thing someone said to me was, you guys must be very quiet right now with what you're doing because you're all remote. And I said, actually, on the contrary, we are doing so much more than we would have in the office because everything that we're working on is so significant to what is happening in our world right now. And the person I spoke to, who actually became a new board member, was like, you know, I never thought of it that way. And so, I mean, our work has tripled in this time, and we've been very, very busy. So that was a very long-winded answer to your question, but there you go.
It was
a helpful and important one. Did Jesse have a comment? Because then I actually have a follow-up for Rebekah, but I want Jesse to have a chance.
I can just jump in and say ours sounds very much like Mary's plan, except we don't do an event because we do not see the ROI on fundraising events. But our Children's Advocacy Day is in January or February, depending on the year. So we, at this time, are also starting on sponsorships for Children's Advocacy Day, which this year is going to be a week because we have to do we're going to do so much of it virtual. So we were like, well, instead of a day, let's do a week, because we just doubled down. And then the other thing I'll add is that in January, the first week of January, we do a card that we handwrite cards to all of our donors. Like our entire team sits in a room and we have a pre-printed card, but we write the donor's name in there, and then we say looking forward to seeing you at Children's Advocacy Day on whatever. And so that goes out the first week of January before our legislative session starts.
So I don't want to take this over, and if anyone has questions for Mark and Aaliyah, drop it in the chat box. But while you're doing that, and I know we're almost out of time, my question for Mark and Aaliyah is, what Rebekah did really reoriented that particular donor to how important your work is and how much more there is. And that seems like a really great message, and I'd like your feedback on that. But I also wonder if you have advice on whether the report or the update or the ask should include information about your financial status. My sense is that, you know, people who are giving really don't necessarily have a sense of whether your organization is in fine shape or is struggling badly and how much their money is needed. And, you know, for groups that are actually doing pretty well and for groups that are struggling, what would your advice on that be as part of this end of year wrap up for people?
Leah, you want to go first or you want me to?
You go on first, Mark.
To answer your last question, it's a judgment call, and it depends on how connected you are to your donor base and how much you've been in touch with them over the course of the year. If you're doing really well, you can talk about your audited financial statement, but you don't really have to get into the finances. If you're really struggling because of things that everyone knows are going on, like COVID or massive unemployment, it's okay to call that out, at least with loyal donors. There's always a worry about doing that, oh, it makes it look like we didn't manage our money well. But I think under these circumstances, that's different. The other thing I want to say is that one thing, Rebekah, you said at the end that Aaliyah said at the beginning, that's really important is your work, all of your work has never been more relevant than it is right now on so many levels. So do not feel like you're ambulance chasers by being out there. People expect to hear from you.
Yeah.
Over to you.
Yeah, just to what Debbie said, and I know folks might have to jump off, but when I'm crafting appeal, it's why now, what for, who says, and for your organizations, the why now, it writes itself. You know what I'm saying? And you just can't be afraid of that, right? Why now? Because the inequities for children, the inequities across races, ethnicities have never been more evident. And we're in this position because we, like, you know, we didn't have this safety net, and that's what we're advocating for, right? So I just don't be afraid of really honing in on why now.
I'm going to ask a quick question. Please pop in the chat box if you'd like us to do an extra call with Mark and Aaliyah where they did some online edits of end of year asks to help people think theirs through. And then if I'm putting this out there without talking to them, but if there's interest, we'll see if we can make that work. I'm not promising it. But just put in the chat box if you'd like to see Mark and Aaliyah do some online end of year appeal edits and commentary. And while you're all doing that, I'm going to say thank you so much. And do any of our speakers have last comments?
No, but I'll be happy to send to Jasmine the link to, I know Anya put the link to the YouTube video and the link to our end of year appeal last year, if you want to see it. And of course, if you have any comments or suggestions, I would love to hear it. But take a look, and if there's anything I can help you with, I mean, please feel free to borrow and adapt any of the ideas that we've come up with. I know sharing is caring, so we're happy to share.
And on that note, Debbie, Aaliyah, are we good?
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
So, bye. Thank you. Stay well.
Stay safe, stay dry.
I'm going to turn the recording off now.